A billionaire walked into my garage and offered me her daughter as a joke. And by the time I handed back her keys, I had found something inside that car that neither one of us could unknow. If that sounds like the kind of story you need to hear all the way to the end, you are in the right place. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming, and let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Caleb Monroe. I run a one-man restoration shop out of a two-bay garage on Arbor Street, in a part of town where the buildings are old enough to have good bones, but nobody rich enough to restore them. The sign above the door says, Monroe Classic Restoration, in hand-painted letters that have been fading for 6 years, and I have never repainted them because my wife Dana was the one who painted them, and I am not ready to cover that up yet. The floor inside is stained concrete that has absorbed so much oil over the years, it has its own smell, something between iron and dark earth, and there is a fluorescent tube above the second bay that flickers whenever it rains. I know every inch of this place, the way you know a body you have lived inside for a long time. I know where the drafts come from in January. I know which drawer sticks and which hinge needs oil every spring, and which corner of the ceiling leaks when it rains hard from the northwest. I know the exact pitch the door makes when it swings shut, and I know when that pitch changes, because something has shifted in the frame. That knowing is not something you can learn in a classroom or read in a book. It comes from years of paying close attention to the same space, and it is the only thing I have ever trusted completely. I work on cars that were built before most people alive today were born. Not because I am sentimental about the past, I am not particularly, but because cars built in the 50s and 60s were built as if the person driving them mattered. The tolerances were tighter, the materials were heavier. The engineers who designed them assumed the machine would outlive the decade, and they built accordingly. When something went wrong in one of those cars, it left a trace you could follow with your hands and your eyes and a little patience. There was no computer telling you what was wrong. You had to listen. You had to develop a feel for what was right and what was off, the way a musician develops pitch, not from a manual, but from hours and hours of paying attention to the sound. And I am good at listening. That is the honest truth of what I do. I listen to old machines until they tell me where it hurts, and then I fix it. I have been doing it since I was 19 years old, working weekends in my uncle's shop in Macon, and I have not stopped since. Some people think restoring old cars is about nostalgia. For me, it has always been about precision, about doing something exactly right, all the way through, with no shortcuts. My daughter Lily is 6. She is in first grade at Clement Elementary, 4 blocks north of the shop, and every morning I take her to school on bikes. My bike is a beat-up 10-speed I bought at a yard sale 8 years ago, the kind of bike that runs perfectly well as long as you don't look at it too closely. Hers is a purple one with a white basket on the front and a bell she rings constantly and for no particular reason. At intersections, passing parked cars, going downhill, sometimes just sitting still while I lock the bikes up at the rack outside school. It does not matter if it is 40 degrees and raining. It does not matter if my knees ache from the cold or if the wind off the river makes it feel 10 degrees colder than it is. We go on bikes because one morning, about 2 months after Dana died, Lily came into the kitchen where I was standing with my coffee, and she said, "Daddy, can we go to school on bikes tomorrow?" And I said yes. And the next morning she was at the door in her helmet before I had finished lacing my boots. We have gone on bikes every school day since. I have never asked her why she wanted to switch. I think I already know. When a car comes into the garage, when a customer pulls into the bay, or I hear an engine in the lot, Lily gets up from whatever she is doing and goes to the back office. She takes her pink foam headphones out of her backpack first. They have a white rabbit drawn on the left ear in permanent marker, which she drew herself when she was 4, sitting at the kitchen table with a marker she was not supposed to have, and she was very pleased with herself about it. She puts the headphones on before she goes through the office door. Sometimes she is in the middle of a drawing, and she takes it with her. Sometimes she is eating a snack, and she carries the whole plate. She never makes a production of it. She just goes. And I let her go. We have never talked about it, not once, not directly. There is a shape to it that we both understand without words, the way you understand not to touch a bruise, even if it is not your bruise. She goes to the back, the headphones go on, and whatever is happening in the garage is on the other side of a door. She has decided she does not need to open yet. I trust that she will open it when she is ready. Until then, I make sure there is a good lamp in the back office, and that she always has drawing paper and at least 2 sharpened pencils and a cup of crayons on the desk. She draws a lot of bicycles. I keep most of them. I want to tell you about Dana, but I am going to keep it short, because that is what she would have wanted. She was 37. She was a middle school art teacher at Jefferson Middle, 2 miles from here, and she had been at that same school for 11 years. She had a laugh that started quiet and built until it took over her whole face, and her students came back to visit her years after they graduated, because that is the kind of teacher she was, the kind who remembers your name and asks what you are reading now. She died on a Tuesday in November, 3 years ago. She had taken a car service to a conference downtown because I was watching Lily, and the vehicle's brake system failed on the on-ramp to the highway. The company's maintenance logs were in order on paper. The investigation found no criminal negligence. The case was closed. I did not fight it. I had a 3-year-old and a shop and a grief that sat in my chest like a stone I had learned to breathe around, and fighting it would have meant leaving Lily with someone else, while I spent years in courtrooms going over documents that nobody was going to change. So I did not fight it. I kept going. That is the only thing I know how to do. Keep going. You put one foot in front of the other until that is not all you are doing anymore, and then one day you look up and realize you have been living, not just moving. The appointment had been on the books for 2 weeks. A 1967 Bentley S3, silver sand exterior, estate kept, low actual mileage for its age, with a problem that 3 other restoration shops in the state had not been able to diagnose. The intake form said the car had been idling rough and cutting out under acceleration. 2 shops had replaced the fuel pump, and 1 had rebuilt the carburetor from scratch, and none of it had made a lasting difference. The car would run fine for a few days, and then the symptoms would come back. My note on the intake said possible secondary fuel line or float chamber issue, needs full visual inspection. 2 weeks. That appointment was just a line in my calendar, a job like any other job, until the morning it wasn't. The day she came in started like most Thursdays. I had dropped Lily at school, come back, made a second cup of coffee, and was under a 58 Packard in the first bay when I heard tires on the lot. It was a black town car, and it was pulling a covered single-axle trailer behind it. 2 men in dark blazers got out and began unloading the trailer without speaking to me. The Bentley came off the ramp slowly, its silver sand paint catching the September light in a way that made it look almost gray and almost gold at the same time, shifting as it moved, the way certain old cars do when they have been properly kept. It was a beautiful car. I will say that now, and I will mean it. Whatever else came after, the car itself was exactly what it was supposed to be. I stood up and wiped my hands on my rag and walked over to it and ran my palm along the rear quarter panel, the way you do when you want to know what something is made of, before you start asking it questions. The metal was solid. The panels sat even. Whoever had kept this car had known what they were doing. The second vehicle arrived about 10 minutes later. It was another town car, newer, and a woman got out of the back without waiting for the door to be opened for her. She was around 60, with silver hair cut close to her head, wearing a wool coat the color of a thundercloud, despite it being September and already warm. In a way, September in this part of the South gets warm, the kind of warm that makes a coat look like a statement. She walked toward the garage, the way someone walks through a space they have already decided is beneath them. Not rudely, exactly, but with a kind of efficiency that says I am not here to be impressed. She looked at the Bentley first, then at the garage, then at me, in that order, and each look was the same length, even, calibrated, giving nothing away. She said her name, Margaret Sinclair, the way some people say their name, as if it is expected to land with weight. And to be honest, I knew who she was. The Sinclair Family Foundation had a building named after them at the university across town. You don't live in this city for 15 years and not know that name. I was about to offer my hand when I heard the back office door click. I didn't look, but I knew. Lily had come in through the side entrance while I was in the lot, and now she was at the table, and I had not had a chance to say anything to her about the car coming in. I kept my attention on Mrs. Sinclair and walked her through what I planned to do with the car, the inspection, the diagnostic sequence, the timeline. She listened without looking at the Bentley, which struck me as strange. Usually the owners of cars like this either hover over every detail, touching things, asking questions about every mark, or they perform not caring to show you they have so many beautiful things that one more doesn't register. She did neither. She just watched me talk like she was assessing something other than what I was saying. Her assistant, a young man with a leather portfolio who had been standing at her right shoulder the whole time, handed me the existing service records when I asked for them. I flipped through them at the counter. That's when I noticed the most recent maintenance log, the one from the estate's regular fleet service, dated about 3.5 years back, had a sign-off line where the inspector's printed name and the signature above it did not match. I almost said something about it right there. I almost pointed to it and asked if they had a contact for the fleet service company. But something stopped me. The same instinct that tells you when to press and when to wait. I filed it in the back of my mind and kept moving. I gave Mrs. Sinclair my estimate. She took the paper with 2 fingers, the way you'd take something you are not sure you want to touch, and read it over slowly. Her expression did not change. Then she set it back on the counter and said, very lightly, very easily, as if she were remarking on the weather, "Well, if you can fix what 3 other shops couldn't, I suppose I owe you triple the rate." And then she looked at me with something in her expression that was not quite a smile and not quite contempt. She said, "Fix this, and my daughter is yours." The young man with the portfolio looked at his shoes. I looked at Mrs. Sinclair. I said, "I'll get started Monday and have a full diagnosis by Wednesday. I can put the triple rate in the contract if you'd like." She said her people would handle the paperwork. She turned and walked back toward the town car. Just before she got in, she paused and looked back at the garage. Not at me, not at the Bentley, just at the space itself, like she was seeing something I couldn't see from where I was standing. Then she got in the car, and the door closed, and both vehicles left the lot. I stood there a moment in the quiet they left behind. Then I went and checked the back office. Lily was at the table with her headphones on, drawing. She had her head down and her crayon moving, and she did not look up when I came in. I did not ask if she had heard anything. I made her a glass of juice and set it beside her and went back out to the Bentley. I found the problem in the fuel delivery system on the second day. It was exactly what I had suspected, a corroded secondary line feeding the float chamber, which was causing inconsistent fuel pressure under load. The fix itself was not complicated once you knew where to look, and I knew where to look because I had seen the same fault pattern in a 64 Rolls Silver Cloud a few years back, and the Bentley and the Rolls of that era share a chassis architecture that most people in this business don't bother to learn anymore, because the cars are rare enough that the business isn't worth it to most shops. But I had learned it. I had spent a winter with a manual and a parts car and figured it out because a client had needed me to, and that knowledge had stayed put. I ordered the replacement line that afternoon and had it fitted by end of day Wednesday. The car ran clean on the first road test. The hesitation was gone completely. That part of the job was done. But I had already found something else. On the second day, while tracing the wiring harness from the rear fuse block forward to the dashboard junction, I had pulled the rear interior panel to access the cavity behind the instrument cluster. The blueprint specification for a 1967 S3 puts that cavity at 11 inches deep. When I measured the actual depth with a probe, it read 8, 3 inches shorter than it should have been. I pulled the panel further back, working slowly, because in cars this age, you do not force anything. Behind the factory backing, someone had fitted a secondary false panel, cut and finished to match the original material, painted to the same interior color, held in place with 4 recessed screws that did not match the factory hardware. It was a hidden compartment, not something the factory put there, something someone had built afterward, carefully, by someone who knew what they were doing. The kind of thing someone constructs to hold something they do not want, found during a routine service. I opened it with a flathead. Inside was a manila envelope, unsealed but folded shut along the top flap. I set it on the work table and stood looking at it for a long moment. The garage was quiet, just the hum of the compressor and the distant sound of traffic on the street. I thought about not opening it. I actually stood there and thought about it seriously, which I want to be honest about, because I think how you make that kind of decision matters. The envelope was not mine. Neither was whatever was inside it. But the car was in my care, and I had a responsibility to understand what I was working with. Then I opened it. There were 3 items inside. The first was an insurance adjustment form, the kind that gets filed when a claim is reclassified after initial processing, usually when new information changes the liability determination. At the bottom of the form, 2 dates, one typed in the original field and one handwritten above it in a slightly different ink, a darker blue, overwriting the typed date and changing it by 11 days. The second item was a copy of the Sinclair Estate Fleet maintenance log, covering a period of about 14 months ending 3 years ago. On the final page, a sign-off line for the annual safety inspection of 6 estate vehicles. The inspector's name printed below the signature line read, D. Howell. The signature above it was not D. Howell's. I have never met D. Howell, but I know what a forged signature looks like, because I have spent 20 years authenticating documents connected to old cars, and a forged signature has a particular quality of hesitation in it, a slight slowing in the stroke, a place where the pen lifted and reset, that a signature written by its actual owner does not have. The third item was a smaller envelope, sealed with red wax, addressed in careful, deliberate handwriting to Edward Sinclair, personal. The seal was intact, unbroken. I did not open that one. I put everything back in the manila envelope and set it on the far end of the work table. I went back to work on the wiring harness. I worked until 6, which is when I stopped to pick up Lily from the after-school program at Clement. On the walk over, I kept my hands in my pockets and my eyes on the sidewalk, and I tried not to think about the envelope. I mostly failed at that. I was thinking about the adjustment code on the insurance form. I had seen that code before. The year Dana died, I had spent 3 months reading every document connected to her case, and that code, 14F, fleet vehicle, single occupant, mechanical failure, liability declined, was at the bottom of her insurance adjustment form too. I had not thought about it in over a year. Standing on the sidewalk outside the after-school door waiting for Lily to come out, I thought about almost nothing else. That night, Lily's temperature spiked. I checked it at 9, and it was 101. I got the cold cloth and the children's fever reducer, and I sat at the kitchen table while she lay on the couch under her yellow blanket with her rabbit headphones looped around her neck. She sometimes wears them to sleep when she is not feeling well, just around her neck, not playing anything, just the weight of them there. something familiar to hold on to. I sat there and watched her breathe. Outside the window, the neighborhood was quiet. The streetlight on the corner made a pale square on the kitchen floor. I thought about the maintenance log. I thought about the 11-day date shift. I thought about D. Howell's printed name and the signature above it that was not D. Howell's signature. I thought about 6 estate vehicles flagged for inspection and cleared without being touched. I thought about a brake line failing on an on-ramp on a Tuesday in November. Around 2 in the morning, Lily's temperature broke, and she shifted on the couch and said, "Daddy, are you still there?" And I said, "I'm right here. Go back to sleep." She did. I stayed until almost 4, and then I went to my room and lay on top of the covers with my boots still on, and closed my eyes and did not sleep. She was fine in the morning. She asked for cereal and whether she could watch 20 minutes of cartoons before school, which is her standard opening position in that particular negotiation, and I said 15, which is my standard counter, and we settled on 17.5 like always. I put her on the bike at 7:40. She rang her bell the whole length of 5th Street, under the big oak that still had most of its leaves in October, and I watched her go through the school gate and turn once at the door to wave. I waved back with both hands, which I do when I want her to see me from a distance. By mid-afternoon on Wednesday, Margaret Sinclair came to the shop unannounced. No town car, no assistant with the leather portfolio. She drove herself in a dark blue sedan, which surprised me, not what I expected from someone who had sent 2 vehicles and 2 men in blazers to deliver a car. She came in through the garage bay rather than the side door, which means she walked past the Bentley to get to where I was standing at the rear of the car. I was cleaning a bolt at the rear axle housing, something to do with my hands while I worked through what I knew. She walked in and stood on the far side of the car and asked when it would be ready. I said Friday. She looked at the car, really looked at it, the way she hadn't when she'd first brought it in. Then she looked at me. She asked if I had found anything unusual. I said I had found a hidden compartment behind the rear interior panel. The silence that followed that sentence was not an empty silence. She said what was in it. I said some papers. She said, "Are you going to tell me what they said?" I said I haven't decided yet. She held my look for a long moment, not with anger, not with threat, more the way someone looks at a door that has just opened onto a room they did not expect to find in a house they thought they knew completely. Then she said, "I'll be here Friday for the car," and she left without another word. Now you know what I found. So before I go any further, drop a comment below and tell me what you would have done, because I genuinely want to know what you think before I tell you what I did. Now, before I tell you what happened on Friday, I need to tell you about Thursday morning, because that is where the real thing happened. The thing I did not see coming and could not have planned for. I had come in early, before 7. The Bentley was mechanically done, the fuel line fitted, the wiring harness secured, the car tested, and running clean. I still had to do the final interior reassembly and the detail work, which I was planning to finish by noon. I was at the work table with the paperwork when I heard the side door open. I assumed it was Lily. She comes in the side door after school, always, because the main garage bay is where the cars are, and the side door brings her directly to the back office without passing through the work area. But it was earlier than school hours, and I had thought she was in the back. She had stayed home that day, still tired from the fever, and I had set her up with paper and crayons before I came out to the shop. I had forgotten how quietly she moves when she is in her own world. She came out of the back office in her socks. She was carrying a sheet of notebook paper with both hands, held carefully out in front of her, the way you carry something wet. Her headphones were around her neck, not on her ears, which I noticed because they were almost always on her ears in the shop. She walked right past me without saying anything, not looking at me, just moving with the focused purpose that 6-year-olds have when they have decided to do something and have not told anyone what it is yet." She walked straight to the counter where Margaret Sinclair was standing. Margaret had arrived a few minutes before, on her own again, to go over the final paperwork, and she was at the counter with her reading glasses on, looking at something. Lily walked up beside her, not in front of her, beside her, the way you approach someone at a counter, and held the drawing out to the side, not looking at Margaret, just presenting it, the way a child presents a thing they made and wants someone to see because they made it, and it was good, and someone should know. It was a bicycle, green crayon, 2 round wheels, a basket on the front, the same as hers. Margaret took it with both hands. I watched it from across the shop. Margaret's hands went still once the paper was in them. She looked at the drawing, and the thing that moved in her face in that moment was not a smile and was not a frown. It was something older than either of those things, a kind of recognition, or maybe the look of someone who thought they had put something away and just found it sitting out on the counter. Lily turned around and walked back to the office without waiting for a response or a thank you. She had done what she wanted to do. She was done. The door clicked shut behind her. In the garage, the silence settled like dust after something heavy has been set down. Margaret set the drawing on the counter very carefully, as if it were a document she did not want to crease. She took her glasses off and folded them into her coat pocket. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "She doesn't come near the cars." I said, "No, she doesn't." Margaret looked at the drawing on the counter. She said, "How long?" I said, 3 years. She looked up at me then, and something shifted in her face that I had not seen in any of our previous conversations. Not softness, exactly, but the expression of someone who has just heard something they already knew and had been hoping they would not have to acknowledge out loud. She came back that afternoon, alone again, in the blue sedan. She sat in the metal folding chair beside my work table. Nobody sits in that chair unless they have decided they are going to be there for a while. And she talked for about 40 minutes, almost without stopping. She told me about Edward, about the morning they found the car on the private road that ran through the back of the estate property, about the investigation that opened in the weeks that followed, and the questions that started to surface about the fleet service records, the gap in the inspection logs, the forged sign-off under D. Howell's name, the 14 months where 6 vehicles had been flagged for required service and returned to the fleet without the service being done, about Sophia, who had approved the cost reduction program as part of a broader restructuring of estate operations, and who had not, Margaret said carefully, had not understood what those specific line items meant in practice. Margaret had believed that when Sophia told her. She still believed it, she said, and the way she said it told me she had said it to herself many times, and believing it had made her next decision feel, if not right, then at least possible. Redirect the insurance adjustment, have the investigation closed before it reached the maintenance records, put the documents in a place where they would not be found without someone looking very deliberately for them, and protect her daughter from a chain of consequences that would have followed her for the rest of her life. That is what she had done. She had held the seam shut with her bare hands for 3 years, and she had gotten very good at holding it, and it had cost her something she could not name exactly, but could feel in every room that went quiet around her, every conversation that stopped when she walked in, every dinner she ate at a long table by herself. She did not cry telling any of this. She just got quieter and quieter as she talked until her voice was almost flat, not empty. Flat the way a surface gets flat when it has been compressed by the same weight for a very long time. When she finished, she asked me what I was going to do with what I had found. I told her I didn't know yet. She nodded, not like she believed me, but like she recognized the answer as honest. That was where she left it. I want to stop here for a second, because I know what you might be thinking right now. You're thinking, he's going to take those documents to a lawyer, or to a journalist, Or he's going to put them in front of her and say, here is what I have, and here is what I need. And I understand why you'd go there, because I went there too. I sat with every one of those options over the following 2 days. I turned them over. I thought about what each one would look like, and where each one would end. But before I tell you what I actually did, and I am going to tell you everything, all of it, I need you to understand something about the 3 years I had already lived through by that point. I was not looking for a reckoning. I had stopped looking for a reckoning somewhere in the 2nd year, somewhere between the end of one thing and the beginning of whatever came next. What I was looking for, without quite knowing it, was somewhere to put it down. There is a difference between those two things. A big one. Friday morning, I drove the Bentley around the block one last time to confirm the repair. Clean fuel delivery, smooth idle, no hesitation under load, no roughness at the top of the rev range. The car ran exactly the way a properly restored 60-year-old engine should run. Not like new, but like itself, at its best, the way it was always meant to be. I pulled it out of the bay and parked it in front of the shop in the morning light. Then I went back inside and took the manila envelope from the work table and carried it outside and laid it flat and centered on the hood of the car. The documents were inside. All 3 items, including the sealed envelope addressed to Edward that I had never opened. I left the wax seal intact. Whatever was in that envelope, it was not mine to read. Margaret arrived at 10 o'clock in the dark blue sedan. She came alone. She pulled into the lot and got out and walked toward the car and saw the envelope on the hood before she reached me. She stopped walking. I was standing off to the side, my hands in my jacket pockets. I said, I know what the fleet log shows. I know the adjustment code on the insurance form. I said it quietly, without drama, because that is the only register I have for things that matter. Then I said, I believe your husband's accident was caused by the same kind of fleet negligence that took my wife. She did not flinch. She did not move. She stood and looked at the envelope and said yes. One word. Then she looked at me and said, I have been carrying that for 3 years. I said, I know. And I did know. I had been watching her carry it since the first day she walked into this garage. I reached into my jacket and took out the invoice. Labor only. The original amount we had agreed on at the start, before the triple rate, before any of it. I held it out to her. She looked at it and said the triple rate stands, and she would write the check for the full contracted amount before she left. I said, no, thank you. I said the triple rate was conditional on the job being what it appeared to be when she brought the car in, and it was not what it appeared to be, and I was not going to take triple the pay for finding something I had not been hired to find. She said that was not how she saw the agreement. I said I understood that, and I had already made my decision. She took the invoice. She looked at the envelope on the hood of the car for a long moment. I told her it was hers, that whatever she chose to do with it from this point forward was entirely her decision and not mine. I told her I had not made copies. I had not photographed any page of any document. What was in that envelope had been inside that car before I found it, and I was returning it to her the same way it had been when I found it, as a thing she alone would have to decide about. Then I stepped back from the car and went inside. Lily was at the back table finishing a drawing. I sat in the folding chair across from her and watched her work. She was drawing a car this time, a red one, with 4 round wheels, a door with a small square window in it, and a person visible through the window, just a circle with 2 dots and a line. She worked on it with the full attention she brings to everything she draws. When she finished, she held it up and said, "Look, Daddy," and I said, "That's a real good one," which it was. I stayed at the table with her. I heard Margaret's footsteps outside on the concrete, slow, going around the car once. Then I heard the door open. Then the engine turned over. Clean and even. The right sound. The sound of something that had been fixed all the way through. There was a pause, maybe 10 seconds, and then the car began to move slowly down the lot toward the street. Lily heard it. She set her crayon down and pushed her chair back and walked in her socks to the open garage door. She stood at the edge of the concrete, one hand resting on the doorframe, and watched the Bentley move down Arbor Street. Margaret drove it slowly. The way you drive something old and heavy when you are paying full attention to it, when you know what it costs to make it run again. The car moved down the block at the pace of someone not in a hurry, and Lily watched it the whole way. She watched until it reached the far corner. She watched it turn. She stayed at the door for a moment after it was gone, looking at the empty street where it had been. Then she turned around and walked back to the table in her socks and picked up her red crayon and looked at her drawing and decided it needed something else and bent back over the paper. I did not say anything about what I had just watched. Neither did she. There is a question I have been sitting with since that Friday morning, and I want to leave it with you now, because I think it might stay with you the same way it stayed with me. If you held in your hands the proof of something that would change everything, for your own grief, for the accounting of something that was done to you, for a family that caused harm they will never be able to fully take back, for a daughter who is innocent of most of it and responsible for some of it, what would you honestly do with it? Not the answer you think you should give, not the one that looks right when you say it out loud, the one you would actually make at 10 in the morning with the papers on the hood and someone standing in front of you who has been carrying the same weight from the other side. I want to hear your answer. Leave it in the comments. I read every single one, and this one I especially want to read. If this story stayed with you, please like it before you go. It costs you nothing, and it means more to this channel than I can explain in a sentence. And if you are not subscribed yet, now is the time. The next story goes somewhere I did not expect either, and I think you are going to want to be there for it.